Welcome gamers to the start of this Let's Play series of Dune Spice Wars. Dune has just been released. It's been in early access for probably about 12 months, I think. I can't remember exactly when it did come into early access, but it's changed a lot in the interim, and it was even just in the last month or even this particular version has a lot of different ways that the game mechanics have now sort of changed. And I'm guessing if you've sort of played the game at all in the previous months, and it will be a different game, basically with the additions that they've brought in, the different ways of playing the game, also along with things, for example, like the actual mechanics as well. I actually stumbled a little bit when I started to play these mechanics because they're not what I'm used to, but it's all cool. It's just a different, things have been finessed. Early access, that's what early access is for, really, is to sort of iron out all those sorts of little bits and pieces. In this episode, I'm just going to point out this is an episode 0, which basically means that if you are, if you're watching this and wanting to see gameplay, that will be in the next episode. So episode 1 will be where you start the actual game itself. In this particular episode, I'm going to be going through what the game has got, the aspects about the game, the different sorts of settings, and so on and so forth. But also I've noticed when I'm sort of been reading a lot of the comments and things, like on the Steam forums, there's a lot of people who don't really understand the lore of Dune, and I want to just spend a bit of time, probably at the end of this, just to sort of go through, and it'll be a fair bit of time, I think, because it's quite a complex lore. The universe around Dune is actually really, really rich. Of course, it comes from Frank Herbert's books, and there's now the movie that's come out as well. But there's an awful lot to take in, particularly with a game like this, where there's so many different mechanics that all sort of harken back to those, to the book, and also to the environment that is sort of set up around that. So there's an awful lot that goes on, and if you don't know the lore, not that it will impact your gameplay, but I think it will enrich your gameplay to just have a bit of knowledge about that. So I'll try to cover the things that are important, but also cover why they're there as well, just so you've got a bit of context. Before I get started, I do want to thank Shiro Games, the developers of Dune, and so in fact they should be in the credits there. If I just pop in the credits, there we go. So Shiro, and so Shiro Games are actually sponsoring this series, and so I do want to thank them for that. But also from your perspective, if you've got any concerns about what I'm saying and you're concerned about my objectivity, at least you do realise this is sponsored content. I honestly can tell you that I don't cover games that I don't like, and also I'm under no instruction not to tell what I think of a game. So I know I do enjoy the game. It's one of these games where I can appreciate the combination of the mechanics. It's a lot of mechanics, but done in a very abstracted, simple fashion. So it can be easy to play, difficult to master, if that makes any sort of sense. But we'll get through that as well in this particular one. Anyway, Shiro Games, as I say, are sponsoring it. There is a link up in the top corner and also down in the description where you can actually go and grab the game. And also there'll be other relevant links in the description there as well. So anyway, let's get into what the game actually does provide. All right, so first of all, what we'll do is let's just talk a little bit about the different modes of play and how they work. Because as I say, this game has changed a lot. There's a new way of playing right now as well. I will point out, a few people are sort of concerned that there's no single player campaign. It doesn't bother me at all, because you've got 3 different modes of play. One of them being Conquest, which is a campaign, but a procedurally generated campaign. It's not a story-driven campaign. I think that some people are concerned that there's no story-driven campaign. It doesn't bother me, to be honest. It really doesn't. And in fact, when I sort of think about it, I'm thinking that because of what the game has got, I much prefer to have something that is more procedural, like what they've actually been able to do with the game. And we'll be playing this from episode 1. We'll be playing the Conquest mode. Let's just go through how it does work. You've got the battle for Arrakis. Now, this is a medium game with up to 4 factions. And so in through here, you've got essentially, you've got 6 factions. It shows 5 there, but there's now a 5th one that has just been added in. So this is actually part of the base game. Now, I'm assuming that there'll be others added in over time. I would imagine over the course of the game, either through DLC or whatever else it might actually be. But you do actually have a lot to play with at the very, very start through these different areas. You choose your faction when you're just going to be playing the standard game. Let's just choose House Atreides, which is, I guess, what people are most familiar with. So we'll just go through that side through there. We can just go into the settings, and through this other side we can change, for example, the size of the map. So basically there's a lot you can change when you actually do go in and create just a normal game. What you've got sort of like small, medium, and I'm guessing it's just large. Yeah, just large. So you've got the 3 different sizes of game settings back in through there. I've just reset it back down to standards. Sandworms again will be sort of like low number. Probably be able to turn them off, I would imagine, as well. Yeah, none, all the way up to them being fairly high. I'll explain what the sandworms are and why they're important when we go through the lore. So I won't talk too much about what this is referring to. The storm strength, so change the frequency of sandstorm apparition. So sandstorms will roam the map, reducing production of villages and harming units. So you've got to be careful of storms. Local strength, so it changes the frequency and strength of raids and neutral militia. So you can sort of play it. I'm just got it on normal at this stage. The spice contracts, so change the amount of spice due every 25 days for contracts. I'll explain what that is as well, but this is sort of all part of the core aspect of the game. You've got different types of victory. So you've got like domination, where you eliminate every other component. You've got a hegemony, where you try to reach 30,000 hegemony to win. Political, where you hold the Charter Dune governorship for 30 days. This is actually something that is awarded to you through what's called the Landstaad, which is actually a group of it's like a council of planets, and you're one of the houses or one of the representatives of that particular house, so you can actually win it that way. Economic, so you hold 50% of the CHOAM shares to win. So you can acquire shares in the trading company, and this is what the CHOAM is. I'll talk about that as well when we talk about the lore. And then assassination, so opponents can be eliminated through assassination missions, and so you can actually sort of use, the background of Dune is just so rich in politics, in agents, in spies, in subterfuge, but also in combat, and it's just such a rich universe that Frank Herbert, the author, created around this incredible book, and then the series of books that then followed. To be honest, full disclosure, I loved Dune, the actual book. I really didn't get into any of the other books after that. I found them just too convoluted, and it was too far removed from the actual Dune story for me. Anyway, that's just my own personal sort of side, but I have read a fair few of the books since Dune. I've read Dune a number of times, so I really do enjoy that book. I haven't read any of the prequels, and we're going to have to talk a little bit about some of the prequel stuff when we do talk about the lore. But I've done my research a little bit, so I should be able to present that. AI difficulty, you've got sort of like different difficulties back and through here. You can see there it tells you what advantage or disadvantage the AI will get. So the easy AI has no military or economic advantage. It develops slower and be gentle with the player. It's the perfect difficulty for discovering the game at your own pace. And then you, of course, go up into normal. The medium AI has no military or economic advantage. It can develop at a normal pace and will treat the player as any other faction. So that's just your stock standard. Across to hard, and then starts to get then advantages from there. And then you've got insane. So you've got a few different sorts of ways of playing this one. And with this game as well, you've got the AI count. You can have up to 3 AIs against you, no more than that, even though there's 6 players potentially that can be on the actual map itself. But you can choose this one down to between 1 and 3 essentially, and you can then go and select who you're going to be fighting against. So you can just go across and choose from one of the others if you're wanting to. So this is how you then can set up an actual game itself. I won't show the actual game. I just wanted to show the setup at this point in time, and then I'll show some of the rest of the game as well. This will probably be a reasonably long episode, I would imagine. You've got different councillors that you then got to choose as you come back through. Again, I'll talk about the lore. Maybe I won't talk about the individuals that come through here. These are characters from the lore where they've got different advantages which push you in certain ways. But we'll start a game and I can then just show you what that looks like and how that will then sort of impact things. It's funny, I'm just talking a little bit about the graphic style. I really quite like it, but I've also read other people who don't like it, and I don't know what they want. It's sort of like people are concerned that it looks a bit anime, but I don't know. It's I actually really do like it. It's a very nice style. Okay, so that's the battle for Arrakis, where you've got a lot of choice that you can sort of then go and set things up. Conquest mode will do that one last. Then you've got the Canley Duel. So the fast and thrilling duel for revenge and power. So two factions enter the fray. Only one can leave with their head held high. So when you come back into here, again, you choose your faction. You've got all 6 to choose from in this particular mode of play. You've got House Atreides, for example. If we go into the settings and through this side, you'll see that we've got less that we can then choose from. This is essentially, we don't actually have a map size setting. It's just, this is like a dual map, so it's going to be a small map. We've still got the Sandworm, Storm Strength, Local Strength, Spice contracts. These are all still part of the gameplay. The actual base gameplay doesn't change no matter which version you actually then go and play. Again, domination, hegemony, political, economic, and assassinations are all in play in this particular duel. The AI difficulty, again, you've got easy, medium, normal, hard, and insane, whichever way you want to go in with that. AI players, you've only got the one, but you can choose who you actually play against. So, again, you've got all of the other 5 factions. Yes, you can actually go and choose whoever you actually want to have to play against. So you've got a lot of setups you can actually do in this particular mode of play. There's so much replayability in this game. It really is incredible. And when we talk a bit about the lore, I'll then talk about the advantages that each faction actually does have to a degree as well. So if we just go back out again, so that's the Canley Duel, a nice, simple 1 versus 1. Actually, I might show the start of a few of these. Let's just go back into the single player. Just go to House Atreides, and I'm just going to leave this basically. I'll just reset it so that it's on the stock standard. I'll just choose the first 2 councillors and just get started. And so, when it comes in, you start off with essentially your main force. Like in the case of House Atreides, it's essentially a city called Arrakis, or a keep called Arrakis. And so this is the Atreides main area. We can't do anything with it until we get to 2,500 hegemony. Hegemony is back up through this other side. But the thing when you're playing this version of the game, I'll just sort of zoom out because we won't be playing this one so much, you will tend to find that there'll be one spice location located next to you. Now, this seems a long way away, but if I click on that spice, you can see there that this is the area, and it is actually right next to where we are. And so that's actually one thing that you will actually sort of notice. But the maps themselves extend a long way. This is just a normal map, but it's quite big, like where it's got like a lot of different sorts of, a lot of room for growth, and also a lot of eventually a lot of potential for combat, like big combat. So that's where we are with that one through there. And again, it's got sort of like the what's it called, the cloth map sort of style approach in through this other side, and then as we sort of come back down, we then get down into the 3D map. Again, I find the graphics in this really nice. I really like it. I know that some people may not, but I actually find it sort of works very well. Just the whole approach. It's sort of it's just got a very cool feel about it. Anyway, that's the random factions that came in with this particular one. When we get into the actual gameplay, I'll talk a lot more about what's going on through here. And so I may even sort of open this up just to show a few of the mechanics in conjunction with the underlying lore as to how things actually do work. So let's leave that one. But the thing you'll notice with this one, the important thing is when you're playing the base game, is that you will actually have access to one spice immediately, and from there you're then going to have to start exploring. So this is actually an area that we could, if we wanted to, send our ornithopter down to explore this zone. He will then just go in, it will expose this region. This looks like there's sort of a bit of a double region. Anything that's over rock like this, or any village has to be over the rock. So there's that one through there, and then this will be a village that we can then take over with forces to then be able to start to mine the spice. And so this is like a spice field back in through this other zone. And so there we go. We've just found Halfur, which is one of the villages. The game itself, and again I'll talk about this in detail, but the game itself has got so many little extras, the way that it can actually then go and play. Like if I send this one over here, for example, there may be something different in that particular region. We didn't find anything unusual in here other than just the spice. And you can see there we sort of lose contact with this. It's so far away from this little village. So this area through here is just coming through, just having a bit of a look around. There's going to be some sort of special location back over here, for example. I'm not playing this one, I just wanted to sort of show how things actually do work. But that is basically the base game. So you've got to start exploring with nothing in mind. Okay, so that's sort of where we are there, and this one will then sort of find. Now you can't have a city inside a in the sand. The cities have to be on rock, and so they're on the little rocky outcrop. So you'll always just find your cities basically in there, but you'll often find your features. In this case, is an energy source, which will then give us other bonuses for this particular region. And I'll talk about this in detail when we play the game. But there's an awful lot of, you can either just play the game on easy and not really worry too much about it, or you can sort of really try to min-max things depending on how you like to play the game. You've really got a lot of choice open to you with this. I'll just quickly show you the difference with the Canley Duel as to how that gets set up when you actually do play a game. Let's just choose House Atreides yet again, because that's probably the one that, again, everyone's sort of most familiar with. We'll just get started. And so this will have the same mechanics that you're playing with. So it's not changing too much at all, but it will change the way that the game is played and to speed things up a little bit. So if I just pause this one right from the very, very start, you just do that by pressing space. You can see already we actually now have all of the information that we needed to know about the surrounds. There's our one piece of the one area of spice that we actually are aware of. And so spice is important, which I'll explain why when we go through the lore. But essentially there's one back and through there. There's a different sort of cities back and through, or different villages back and through this other area, other resources. So we actually have start off by, we've already scouted everything around us. So when you're playing the Canley Duel, you can at least go in with your eyes open and start to make your decisions right from this very, very start as to how you want to play the game. I think this is a really cool way of playing, because it means that you're not waiting for discovery. You are actually just going through and thinking, okay, what does this village give me? This gives me a couple of different benefits, like handymen and youthful eagerness, as opposed to this one over through here, for example, which is going to give me data brokers and hard workers and so on and so forth. So you can sort of start to think, okay, well, what do I need to build first, blah, 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 and sort of go through with a bit more of a plan. So where if you play with the base game, you've got to do the exploration first and then figure it all out. So, I mean, you sort of have to muddle your way through a little bit as you go, but it's sort of, I don't mind this at all. Also, the actual map itself is very, very small. Like, it's very, 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 very compact. We're right up against the border here. This is the back end of the map, and there's the other player will be over here somewhere. So there's not really a lot to maneuver into. This, as I say, I like the compactness of this. These are the sorts of games that I like to be playing. So anyway, that's very, very cool with the way that one actually does work. And now for the new version, which is actually more of a campaign. This is called Conquest. You can see a long-lasting campaign on the northern hemisphere of Arrakis. Will your house survive the Spice Wars and come out victorious, or will you perish and be forgotten? Now, I think everything is on the northern side, actually. Scheming for the control of the northern hemisphere of Arrakis. I think that's the only area that's actually habitable, is around the pole, the North Pole. I don't think anything else is. I think that the sandstorms or something are too wild in the south. I think that's sort of how it works. So let's just go and have a quick look at Conquest and how that is different. Just go no. And again, you can see through here, we no longer have all 6 players. We only have the great houses to play with. And I'll talk about what they are as well when we talk about the lore. But this is, essentially, we've got House Atreides again, House Harkonnen, House Corrino, and the new one, which has actually just been come out at release, which is House Ecaz. And so if we just go back to Atreides again, you'll see it's the same sort of deal back over through here. But the settings are very, very simple, very different, really. There's only one lot of settings, like difficulty, and then whatever name you want to call it for saving. So there's not a real lot you can do with this, because the difference is in the choices you then make as you get into it. So let's just go and start a game with it. I'll just put it on normal as an example. Now we'll be playing one of these just to get started anyway with the actual series itself. Right, here we go. So again, Arrakeen, traditional seat of the Arrakis governorship for Duke Alito Atreides. And so this one then plays out where we've actually got the northern pole. That's the North Pole area in through there. I don't know if it'll tell us what that actually is. It won't. It will give us information. Actually, it's not doing it here. I'll just get started. This is actually our one little area. This is actually the zone that we start in. Now, when we click on this one, we get like a random selection of cards that we then get to choose from with how we're going to then get started. And so just have a bit of a read through these when you're playing. Again, these are random, which means every single game is going to be different. The map is different each time. So you've actually got like a different map. You've got different parameters on the map, different objectives. So the game does chop and change a lot when you play this particular mode, which is really, really cool. There's all sorts of other things as well. In fact, if I just go back out, I don't know if I can actually. I'll just choose one of these. All right, so it doesn't matter really what I choose in through there. Now I can only play one of these two. So we've got one here, for example, this is mission recap, so extend your grasp. There's always more room to expand on Arrakis. Hopefully the land is worth it. And then this one over through here is a mission recap, which is the famous summit. So reach the summit before your opponents and keep it under your control. And so these have got different features. Now if I click on one of these, in fact if we click on that one, is that going to, yeah, that's the North Pole. And so the North Pole is not controlled by anyone, but then you've got these like random sectors around where each player actually does sort of start. I mean, it's always around the same sort of number of territories. So you end up sort of having mini games for each actual territory, which I'll get started with one of these so you can see what that looks like as well. The difference here is we've got a few different areas though. We've got to complete 2 of the objectives, and there's 4 that we can choose from. We can defeat both the houses or own 8 territories or ally with the Fremen. So this is actually ways that we can actually then go and beat the actual game itself. If we go and have a look over through this side, we've got, this is the Fremen relationship as to where they sort of actually are. And so as things develop with them, it's going to invite them in essentially to be able to then help us. So as you go towards the full allyship of the Fremen, this will then sort of start to colour itself in. And you also then have this sort of pressure meter. So for every mission or for each territory under control, the pressure progresses by 3%. So this will then, the pressure will start to mount. Essentially, you can see increased chance of getting attacked. So it's going to then mean that you become more and more of a target on Arrakis itself, and so it makes the game progressively more difficult as you sort of then go and play. Each of the actual areas you can sort of see in through here. If we go across and click on this one in through this side, for example, again it's a random area, but it's also then got random modifiers. So the modifiers are quite cool as well. And so you've got mission modifiers. Hold Mount Idaho to gain plus 100 hegemony production. So this is actually like a special mission that we then actually have. And then we have different things. I think it comes over to here, development assets. So these assets allow you to improve your territories by choosing bonuses that will apply as long as you keep them. And so the bonus in here is actually the for the Mount Idaho range is plascrete production, which I'll explain when we start to play the game. But this is the bonus for this particular region, and I can click on this one over through here. The bonus for this one is to get +2 authority production, which is actually means that we can then assimilate more villages a bit more easily. So you can sort of see in through here territory modifiers in through there. There's no spice here, for example, and so instead you sell authority to CHOAM rather than spice to get your money that way. There's no sandworms in this region because there's no spice. This one over through here is actually the same as well. This is random. You don't know what you're going to get each time you play, and so each territory has got like a different parameter. Like back in through here, for example, this is the Great Erg, which does actually have spice. Back over through this side, spice again. So there's a few around here with all spices, the bonus. That one's got manpower bonuses. More spice there. Spice, manpower there again as well. This one here has got a bonus to fuel cells. Bonus to intelligence, which is actually really important in this game. Spice again. So there's all sorts of different bonuses. Again, all randomly assigned at the start of the game. So it's quite interesting because it does play differently every single time you play it. If we just go into, say, this one here for an example, we still have to choose 2 councillors, which I'll talk about when we actually get playing. But this one here, you've got all sorts of different rewards by claiming the territory that you're aiming for, different sorts of things. So you'll be wanting to read through to figure out how each little area has to be played. So if we then go and start this, we then just start like basically a normal game, but on a very, very small map. Not tiny, not as small as the Duel maps, but still small enough. So if we just go and close, let's extend our grasp. So here we go, we'll just close this one off. I'll just pause that so we can sort of see what things actually are. You'll notice that we don't actually have any spice here, so we can't actually build any spice at this location, but it's not a terribly big map. And so it's big enough because we've now got the other players in with us, 2 other players in with us, and so we have to still defeat them in this territory. And so, and then we just go and essentially just start playing a normal game, which I will actually cover in the game itself. But it's the same parameters essentially as what we've seen elsewhere. And so I will actually go through how this all works when we do get started to play our actual real game. But it's very, very interesting. Like if you are wanting to actually have a lot of, like, there's incredible replay is what I'm trying to get at with the actual game itself. All right, let's leave the actual gameplay here, and we'll just go and exit, and we'll talk about the lore of Arrakis. Right, so the lore of Dune is very, very complex, but the game itself isn't. So I'll try to, I think by having context though as to what's going on will then help you to understand why different things are in the game. So it'll sort of explain why there's Landstaad rulings and why they're important, what a Seitch is and why they're hidden. Things like this, and I've been reading a few of the comments from people actually just who are struggling with the game or don't really sort of get a connection with the game. I always like to do that because I sort of see a big part of my role with this is to actually try to make it approachable for people who aren't connected with the game. So I think that's sort of on me to try to impart that information. So I hope this helps if you really don't know much about the lore of Dune, and it is very, very complex. I've read the book a number of times. I have tried to read the rest of the series, but have failed. It sort of got a bit too overwhelming, a bit too boring, to be perfectly honest. For me, it didn't engage me once I got past the original book. But the original book is incredible. The books after the Dune book, or a couple of the Dune books, then sort of extend out thousands of years of sort of like history and things like this, where you've got these god emperors that are sort of half worms and stuff like this, which is, it just gets a bit much. But I won't really be going into there. But there's also a set of books that were written by Frank Herbert's son. I think his name's Brian Herbert, and he actually wrote a prequel series. Now, I've read none of these, but some of what we see in this is actually from those prequels. So just be aware, there's a lot of input that has been put into the game itself. Now, also before we get started, this is not a snapshot. Like, it's not like you're not playing, for example, like Europa Universalis, where you've got like a snapshot in time and something is happening right at that particular point in time, and that's where you start. If you know what I mean. Like, it's not as if you've got you do actually have a time that you're starting, but the lore is loose. So just be aware of that as well. Like, if you are a purist for the game, this game may frustrate you a little bit if you are looking for an exact snapshot of the start of something that does happen. So, and I think the easiest way to compare this is to compare a game, for example, like Europa Universalis, which is actually tries to be historically accurate for its starting points with each actual ruler, and a game like Civilization, which on the other extreme, where you've got a defined ruler from anywhere in any point in history that is then the spiritual leader of that particular faction. We're not at the extreme end of like the Civilization eras where they can be picked from anywhere, but we are in a loose area, sort of in around where the book actually would then sort of start. But it's not an exact time when the book does start, if that makes any sort of sense. So just first of all, just get your head into that. Also, some of the characters have been changed a little bit to I don't really know the reason why, to be honest. So I can't say for whatever reason, but they, like, for example, we've got a little bit of gender swapping, a little bit of race swapping and stuff like that. Now, that just tends to happen nowadays, so it does bother me with I guess historical things, and they've certainly kept, I guess, the main characters the way that they're supposed to be, but there are some changes. I'll point them out as we get into the actual, like as we dive more deeply into the actual characters, and also into the base lore of the factions that we're going to be having a bit of a look at. So I'll just sort of expose it. I know some of you get turned off by that. I do with certain things, but it hasn't bothered me greatly with this game. I know that when, for example, when the game first came into early access, that was one of the big contentious parts, was that one of the main characters has been changed from male to female. It's out there. I'll just point that out there as who that is when we get there. I don't know the reason why. I don't know why they were swapped. But I've got to also say that the factions themselves are quite well balanced. Not in terms of diversity, but in terms of their actual gameplay ability. They do actually have different pros and cons, but again, we'll get into that when we actually talk about each of the actual factions. Let's start, I think, with Dune itself, the actual planet, the planet Arrakis. Now, Arrakis is a desert planet, which is why it's called Dune. So it's sort of like how we call the sun, whereas, it's sort of like I guess official name is Sol. So Arrakis is the actual name of this desert planet that we see down through here, and Dune is its sort of common name, I guess, is the way you sort of then talk about it. Now, it has, of course, massive sand areas on the planet itself. It has rocky outcrops as well around the place, and it also has different cliffs, which they tend to call walls. So there's different areas that get sort of walled off by cliffs that sort of stop different things from moving through them. So this is sort of how the lore or the book of Dune is sort of then played out on this particular world. Now, Spice Wars. Why is it called Spice Wars? This is actually really, it's quite involved. But spice is not your cinnamon, your nutmeg. They don't grow those things on Dune or on Arrakis. What it is, they've got these sandworms, these massive sandworms that end up sort of creating what they call spice. Now, spice in the game and in the book and in the lore is a very special ingredient that allows a force called, I think they're called the Space Guild, and they're navigators who have been changed over time to be able to warp space, and so they can actually, they're the only ones that can travel faster than speed of light around the galaxy. And so all of the factions, all of the groups, all of the whole Galactic Empire relies on the Space Guild to transport them into different locations, and the Space Guild relies on spice to be able to do that. And the only place in the whole galaxy that they can get this particular ingredient is from Arrakis. And so that's why Arrakis is so important. It is the most valuable planet in the galaxy, in the known galaxy. So Spice Wars. Now, again, the word wars needs to be sort of spoken about, because it's not open warfare, and I'll try to explain why this is sort of the case. It sort of is in the game, but in the lore, it's not. There is a group, like the Galactic Empire consists of an emperor. It consists of great houses and minor houses, and they all vote in what's called the Landstaad or Landstaad. I always get the name confused. Anyway, Landstaad is essentially what they have, where it's like their council, where they actually get to vote. The emperor has more votes than anybody else. I think that's how it works. The great houses have a high number of votes, and the minor houses just a small number of votes. So they're sort of like in the third rung. There is corruption in the empire, massive corruption at all levels. So just be aware of that. There's different sort of subterfuge or different pressure can be applied from different locations to then have different rulings made. Now, the Landstaad creates all of the actual global rules for the whole Galactic Empire, and so it's not just the players on the planet that have a say in this. It's all sorts of different houses that also then have a vote. Now, the way the game models this is it does actually allow the player to have a certain number of votes and to control votes, but there is also that other aspect where it's got other houses will also then have their own say. So it's a very important thing to try to control. It's essentially like it is the Galactic Council that has impact over Arrakis. Now, you can imagine if Arrakis is all so important that the spice, that you'll often sort of hear the term, the spice must flow. The spice must flow essentially means that the spice must be mined and taken off Arrakis and basically sold through the Traders Guild, which I'll talk about in just a minute as well. That's another aspect. And so that the Space Guild can then sort of go and use that to then start to sort of warp space and then be able to then allow everyone else to travel around the actual galaxy. So it's incredibly important. So you can imagine that everyone wants a say in what happens on Arrakis. So that's sort of why Arrakis or Dune is just so important. And so the Spice Wars are not just open warfare. This is not just a little lonely planet that they're fighting over. This is the most important planet in the galaxy, and the wars that happen here are done under the essentially under the approval or disapproval of the Landstaad Council, and including other factors as well. So the wars are often a combination of open warfare and very, very deep subterfuge. So be aware of that as well. The game sort of models the subterfuge through its use of agents in the game, and the agents are very, very important. They can give you all sorts of advantages. Again, the game does a very good job of modeling this in a simple way, but still in a comprehensive way. So both of these things are modeled that way, which is very, very cool. And you can sort of decide, okay, I'm going to really focus hard on trying to impact the decisions of the Landstaad so that I get benefit from it. Or you may think, I'm going to give up that aspect and go a different way. I'm going to sort of focus more heavily on, for example, the intelligence and try to get my spy network established so I can then do other things that way. There's so many different ways of playing this game. It is just incredible. And it all sort of harkens back again to this lore. Now, we've spoken about the Space Guild, which are the navigators. We've spoken about the Landstaad, which is essentially the galactic government, which has impact on what happens on Arrakis for those very reasons. There is another third big group, which is called CHOAM. Now, these are acronyms. I forget what they stand for. But anyway, this is essentially your traders. And so the traders are the ones who buy the spice from the planet, and then with the spice, they then go and then distribute it around, to the various factions or to the Space Guild, whatever else it might actually be. But you trade through the CHOAM system, and you also, when you're playing the game, the Emperor also takes a cut of what you are then producing. The Emperor is putting pressure on the whichever house controls Arrakis to mine as much as they possibly can, because he gets his cut from it as well. So that's the big broad meta picture of what's going on Arrakis or on Dune, and that's why the Spice Wars is so much more than Spice Wars. It's spice, subterfuge wars, the whole lot. There's a lot going on with this one through here. On Arrakis itself, the way it sort of works is that the Landstaad sort of dictates the laws of what happens. The Emperor can actually override certain aspects, and the Emperor decides who controls the actual spice. Now, if the Emperor tried to have direct control over Arrakis, there would possibly be an uprising in the Landstaad, so he can't really afford to do that. So he does that through subterfuge by using other houses against each other so he gets his power through that particular method, I guess, would be the sort of very brief way of of talking about it. And in the book starts off with the Harkonnen faction being in control of Arrakis, and then the Atreides house is then given control of it, but the Emperor, through subterfuge, has actually made a secret deal with the Harkonnen to be able to then come back in and eradicate the Atreides clan, and so he gets more benefit that way. So there's a lot that goes on in the book, a lot more than what the movie can even really or the movies can really sort of cover, because it's just so deep with what does go on. So Arrakis itself has got a competing great house, which is sort of where the wars aspect does come from. There is also a local population called Fremen, and the Fremen live in these sort of like secret Seitches, is what they're called, which are sort of like hideouts in the cave networks of the planet itself, and they live in the deep desert, and so they sort of live away from the other civilizations, but they are the only real force that knows exactly how to live on Arrakis. Everyone else has to bring in all their luxuries, and they've got to build up their special buildings, etc., but the actual Fremen themselves don't need to do that. So they actually are a law unto themselves to a large degree, and these are also then brought into the game as well in a few different ways, and so I'll talk about what they actually are. But imagine the Fremen seeming to be sort of like a small nomadish group, but actually being much, much larger in number than what anyone really understands, and they are sort of secreted away inside their sort of cave network called CHOAM. We also have other things like in the game where it's introduced like trade networks and things like that to sort of work in a little bit of a hybrid between Fremen and CHOAM, for example, where there's like a black market that then sort of deals. I don't remember that being in the book, to be honest, but the game does model those aspects as well. Let's go and now talk about the actual factions, and then we'll sort of, now that I've given you a bit of an overview, we can then sort of start to go through and pick apart the players that we're going to be playing with. And this, of course, may change over time as other factions may or may not come in. I actually don't know what the plans are for the game. So we'll just go into single player. And I will actually just go to the Battle for Arrakis and just talk about each of the factions in through here. So this is the base game. Let's start with Arrakis itself. And so we'll talk about the people who live on Arrakis. And so this is the Fremen back in through this other side. Now, I'll just click on these and we'll just talk about each one of these in turn. So the Fremen, if we have a quick look into it, so the Fremen are the only people native to Arrakis and will do anything to protect their way against the off-worlders. While their leader, Liet Kynes, doesn't originally come from Dune, she's every bit as determined and attached to the planet as the next Fremen. And so Liet Kynes, who we sort of see in through here, is the leader of the Fremen. Now, in the book, this is an old archaeologist. Max von Sydow, I think, actually played this particular character in the original movie of Dune. So that's the character I'm used to sort of equating with Dune itself. So it's so it was an archaeologist who had sort of gone native, if you know what I mean. Like he'd actually sort of embraced the lore and the culture of Arrakis so much that he essentially was a Fremen himself and highly respected by the Fremen. So his first loyalty is to the Fremen. So he essentially represents the Fremen to the outside world. Now, this particular character has been gender swapped and race swapped, I think, as well. But that's so I know that some of you will actually, if you're purist about the story, that may bother you. It doesn't get in my way so much because we're talking about, it's not as if we're talking about historical or even, I worry about it when it's things like, for example, if they were changing, if this was a snapshot of the start of the actual Dune book, that would bother me. But the fact that we've sort of got like these sort of loose groups doesn't bother me as much, if that makes any sort of sense. Anyway, the way we go in through this other side with the Fremen, so they actually they're more going to be sort of like getting advantages of what they can do on Arrakis, but not very much off Arrakis. And so we can see in through here that they have like spice fields in neutral and controlled regions can be harvested by special teams. So they don't need to go in with actual harvesters. They can actually use special teams to do it. These are all their benefits. So can form alliances with Seitches outside of the territory. Now the Seitches are the other Fremen groups. So this is just, it starts off with just the Fremen group controlled by Liet Kynes. And then we have can use thumpers to perform worm riding. So these can actually travel very quickly around Dune, around Arrakis itself on sandworms. And so that's a big advantage that they actually then end up having as well. Villagers have -1 maximum building slot. So when they take a village, they're not very good at actually sort of establishing what happens with a village. And so they actually have less building slots available to them to be able to then build up. So they have other advantages, but they don't actually have that advantage. Now, they also you'll often see with the hegemony sort of triggers, at 5,000 hegemony, surrounding a deep desert grants control over it. And so if you can sort of get the outside edge, you then get to take the middle bit. And so thumpers are generated passively and attract larger sandworms that can travel further. So this just, again, allows even bigger sandworms to be ridden. At 10,000, it grants knowledge of enemy alliances with Seitches. And so, again, the other Fremen then start to communicate more openly with this Fremen faction, so that they get more information about what's happening with the Fremen side of things. And allied Seitches have a settlement capable of hosting a specialised industry. So the Seitches themselves, which again are not the villagers, these are secret sort of almost cave network type areas of Fremen, and so they also then get a bit of a bonus as well. Now, the Seitches themselves also have other bonuses within the game, but the Fremen get a little bit more out of them than anybody else that does get to control them. They've got different councils. I won't go through each of these. If you're sort of into the story, Paul Atreides, I think, ends up with a love interest of Chani Kynes back into here. I think that's the way it sort of then works. Again, you'll sort of see Stilgar, which is part of the movies, part of the book as well. Othium, I'm not sure if I remember him at all. Mother Ramallo as well. These are all different sorts of either characters that have come to Dune and then become Fremen, or Fremen native, like Stilgar is a Fremen native, for example. So that's sort of how they then work with the Fremen. So this is the group that is native to Arrakis. It says native, but I know that from the actual backstories, they were humans that settled on Arrakis many, many eons ago. So they've been here for thousands of years, essentially. So that, might as well be considered the natives of Arrakis itself. Very, very strong fighters as well. So they have different advantages there when you're playing the game. So that's them. If we just go to the next one, which is sort of loosely Fremen, sort of in between the Smugglers. And so the Smugglers, I don't remember these from the book at all. I think that there was like a faction that sort of was coming in and dealing directly with the Fremen, dealing sort of underhandedly with the great houses. Sort of just, they're smugglers. They're essentially bandits. And so if we have a look at these ones in through here, so there's a fine line between smugglers and full-fledged bandits. And Esmarth Tuek is an adept at walking that line. Smugglers can provide anything to anyone, provided they put the price and do not look at the specifics too closely. And so what they have advantages in can install underground headquarters in opponents' villages, so they can sort of get subterfuge happening essentially through their smuggling networks. Their units travel a little bit faster. The authority cost to annex a village suffers no penalty from distance to its actual siege. And so Siege 2ek is where this one is established, so it doesn't actually have like a keep that we saw there with with the Atreides clan. It's got its own siege as its centre of government. And the authority cost to annex a village is increased 50% more by owned villages. So if they own a village, I'm not exactly sure how that one does work. Anyway, it just means that they have to cost them a little bit more authority actually, if it's somebody else's village, it costs them more to then flip it over to one of theirs because of the corruption, I guess. At 5,000, they can place a bounty on Landstaad resolution, so they can actually impact the land, even though they're not actually part of the Landstaad, they can still actually impact it through corruption. And so they can join the Landstaad Council with 50 votes as well at 5,000 hegemony. At 10,000, they installs a major underground headquarters in every main enemy base, and so again allows them to see what's going on, I guess, and gain 50% resources from pillaging a village in through there as well. So they actually, if they pillage the villages, they then get more income from that. All right, so that's it, because the villages can either be assimilated or pillaged, essentially, are the ways that you can sort of then deal with the villages. The villages, if they're left to their own devices, may form raiding parties that will then come after your territory, so you do have to deal with them one way or another. Anyway, that's the Smugglers. As I say, I don't remember them from the book. They may be in there, and probably someone in the comments will then write what's going on through there. Let's talk about the Emperor, which is House Corrino. So we've spoke about the Landstaad, about the Galactic Empire, and about everything that was going on with them. And so this is Imperial House Corrino, who's ruled the galaxy for 10 millennia, and Shaddam IV intends to keep it that way. The situation on Arrakis calls for the direct intervention of the Paddish Emperor, who will use his wit and might of his administration to turn the war to his benefit. So in the book, he sort of is trying to get House Harkonnen and House Atreides to essentially fight each other, and he really wants to sort of choose whoever's going to win that fight to then support, and so he can't take it over directly himself, but the weaker the houses that controls it, and the more that they rely on him and his special Sardaukar fighters, the more power he has over it. Now, in the game, he actually comes and plays as one of the factions vying for control of Arrakis itself. And so this is the Emperor. Now, he also then has a number of his princesses or his daughters. So this is when Sissia is the third daughter of Shaddam IV. We've got this is Princess Irulan, who ends up becoming Paul Atreides' wife, but not love interest as such. We've already seen, I forget her name, whatever the daughter was of Liet Kynes. Chani, I think, is the love interest, but Princess Irulan is the essentially the author of the Dune's story, as sort of how that one actually does then go and work. And so we've got these different areas, but again, an interesting faction to play. And so these are sort of more removed from what's going on and more connected with the Landstaad aspect of things. So villagers have a +1 building slot, so they can actually build more because the Emperor is in control. Can use the Imperial Edict on Landstaad resolutions to switch their scope, so they can actually impact what gets voted on regarding Arrakis. Other factions have to spend +100 influence to cancel a non-aggression pact with House Corrino. So once you've got a non-aggression pact with them, it takes a lot of influence to be able to then go and dissolve that if you need to then go and fight them. Authority cost to annex a village is increased 200% more by distance from the Imperial base. So the further they go away from their start location, the more difficult it then becomes. At 5,000 hegemony, they can use a main base deployment on Corrino and neutral villages once. So they can actually sort of deploy, I don't know if it's a second main base. I haven't actually played this faction I played it when it first came out just to see what it was like, but I didn't play much of it. And so it can offer Imperial mandate, giving a Sardaukar to another faction as part of a trade. So they can actually use this special, very, very high value fighting forces to actually give, and in the book, essentially the Harkonnen forces end up being able to have some of the Empress Sardaukar fight with them to try to get rid of House Atreides in the combat in the book itself, and will be a bit of a spoiler for you, I guess, in the coming movie. At 10,000 hegemony, so the military units gain +5% power per faction with less CHOAM shares. So anyone that's got less CHOAM shares, this is the trade network. So you can buy shares in the trade network. If anyone that doesn't have as much control over that has less military power. I guess CHOAM sort of brings the supplies in, takes the spice away type thing. And so gain +1 guild favour production per faction with less CHOAM shares. So again, CHOAM being very important for House Corrino because they like to control things from the Galactic Empire side of things. I hope that makes sense. All right, that then leaves the three main factions that we then get in the books, which is two main factions and one that's part of the prequels. So we've got House Atreides, House Harkonnen, and we also then have House Ecaz. Now, I think what I'll do is I'll start off with House Harkonnen and then go back through Atreides and Ecaz. So, House Harkonnen. This is the Baron. Now, Baron Harkonnen is, at the very start of the Dune book, the Harkonnen clan are in control of Arrakis. Now, they have other planets as well. It's not just the one planet that they actually have, but whoever controls the spice really does dictate a lot of what goes on. It gives them a lot of power. And so House Harkonnen is ruling Arrakis with an iron fist, essentially, or an iron thumb, or whichever way you want to sort of call it. And you can see through here they use oppression on their own villagers to get the most out of them. They can sacrifice agents to reduce emissions cost and prepare time. The villagers gain +5 resources per active militia, which is sort of like a police force. So the militia act like a police force to get more out of their local population, but they do suffer an overall negative 10% resource production. And I'll talk a little bit more about what happens. At 5,000 hegemony, they gain 50 intel by pillaging a village, and killing an enemy non-mechanical unit gives 5% chance to receive a brainwashed agent. So they can sort of then take over people mainly through aggression, and they can essentially brainwash. That's what happens in the book as well with the main mentat, I think, of the House Atreides ends up betraying House Atreides, and that's sort of why so many of the big problems that actually sort of occur because of that betrayal. At 10,000 hegemony, so sacrifice agents give a chance to not consume an operation on use, and gains +1 additional agent slot in each non-faction field, which essentially this is just to do with the way that agents are then used in the game. So these are, like, they do use subterfuge to a large extent, but not anywhere near as much as their actual sort of native aggression. Like, these are a very, very aggressive faction. If you want to be playing with mainly a combat focus, then House Harkonnen is a good choice. You can see through here, it says House Harkonnen shares its chilling reputation with its leader, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. They have been called despotic, merciless, scheming, and devious. And those are only their finer qualities, and they really are. Like, they're a great. The writing and the way that they're sort of portrayed in the books and in the movies is just fantastic. Like, they really are super, super evil. But again, within the Landstaad network, so they're still a great house, but they have their own way of operating. So you can sort of see that the Emperor and the Landstaad, everything is at hand's distance, and everyone can just do their own thing to a degree. They can even fight amongst themselves, but there's then pressure that can then be applied politically or through subterfuge or whatever else it might be, to then sort of, for other factions to then have a bit of a say in what goes on with these fights that do go on. So there's a lot of bickering. It's very, very feudal in this big galactic empire. So that's House Harkonnen. Now, they start off in control of Arrakis in the book. They because of their poor, because the local population starts to sort of sabotage what they're doing, and they actually start to, the flow of spice dwindles down, and so there's a big concern in the Landstaad about this lack of supply, and so the decision has been made by the Emperor and the Landstaad Council to remove House Harkonnen from Arrakis and install House Atreides. Now, House Harkonnen, secretly with the Emperor, the idea is that House Atreides comes in, fixes things up, and then House Harkonnen then comes back in and takes back over, essentially, which is sort of what the book is largely about. And so there's still a big presence of House Harkonnen, even though House Atreides is given the contract to then try to sort of then get them the most spice from the actual world itself. And people don't believe that they'll be able to then go and do it. So there's a lot of play and interplay with what does go on. This is why the Fremen are so important, because they're the ones who sabotage the mining operations, etc. So you've got to have the Fremen on side to make sure that your mining operations go smoothly, etc., etc., etc. So it's very, very convoluted the way the book is sort of been structured. It's incredibly deep. Anyway, that's it is for me anyway. for my limited reptile brain. Anyway, let's just go back out. But that's a good choice. If you're wanting to play aggressively, then that's a very, very good choice. And so they control Arrakis before House Atreides then comes. And so then House Atreides is then given the contract. And so this is Baron Leto Atreides. This is not Paul Atreides. Now, I know there's a lot of people saying, well, where's Paul? Where's Paul in all of this? Paul is not actually listed. Now, I'm assuming that's because there may be a DLC that may come, or there may be another faction that might come with him, sort of with his own group of Fremen, freedom fighter type units. I'm assuming that will possibly, it would make perfect sense to do that with the game, because everyone would want that particular DLC if that does come. But Baron Leto is essentially Paul. Even at the start of the book, Paul is a bit of it's from Paul's perspective is the way the books are sort of written. But he is a bit of a nothing character at the very, very start of the book. He's just a young man. He's the heir for Duke Leto, Duke Leto Atreides, but he is not an important character and becomes important. Like, the story is about his hero's journey, essentially. Anyway, House Atreides. So we see in through here, the stellar reputation of House Atreides owes a lot to its leader's commanding style, firm yet honourable and fair. By imperial decree, the Atreides just inherited the stewardship of Arrakis and have done a lot to take over, a lot of work to do to take over from the Harkonnens. So when they do take over, they have to then try to undo a lot of the problems that the Harkonnens have created with the local people. They also have to then find all the different traps and all sorts of different things that have been left over by the Harkonnens to try to then cause as much disruption and mayhem as they possibly can when House Atreides does take over in the book. And so these are very honourable, the way that they play. And so you can sort of see through here, can use peaceful annexation on neutral villages. Other factions lose no authority from treaties with House Atreides. So they've got other factions lose 100% more Landstaad standings when breaking a truce with House Atreides. So essentially, if another faction does break with that, the Landstaad standing will actually frown upon that what's actually happening there. So once a truce has been established, so you don't want to be making a truce with them unless you plan to run the game that way. Cannot pillage neutral villages. So these ones cannot do that pillaging. Everyone else can, and it's a viable prospect to do that. But House Atreides is too honourable to do that. So that stops them from getting that one through there. At 5,000 hegemony, they gain 10% Solari, which is essentially your money production, while under the effect of a positive targeted resolution, and gains 10% military unit power, while under the effect of negative targeted resolution. So you get different bonuses, whether it be positive or negative. Now, the resolutions tend to be Landstaad standing resolutions. So you can see them through here. At 10,000 hegemony, ignores all charters prerequisites except for Landstaad standing charters, and then permanently gains 2% resource production upon being elected for a positive resolution. So there's different things. This will make more sense if you do play this faction in the actual game itself. So that's House Atreides. So House Atreides, we end up with Paul Atreides, the son. His mother is Jessica. Now, she is a concubine, so she is not married to Duke Leto. She's not of, because of the power struggles that go on in the Galactic empire, the marriages are political. They're not love matches, and so we see that with, for example, when we're looking at Paul Atreides, for example, marrying the Emperor's daughter, but the love interest is Cheney, who's one of the Fremen. And similarly in through here, Duke Leto hasn't married at this stage. But his concubine is Lady Jessica, who is Paul's mother. So Paul Atreides from the movie's mother is Lady Jessica. She's a Bene Gesserit, which I won't go through because we don't need to be looking at all of that aspect as well. There's so many different intertwining aspects to the lore of the actual game itself. But these are, you've got your Duncan Idaho in through there. So he actually came early to Arrakis to then try to establish connection with the Fremen, to sort of try to make it smooth for when the spice is being mined. You can see through there, he actually works well with the Seitches, which essentially Seitches are the secret locations of the Fremen. Lady Jessica is Paul's mother. You've then got Gurney Halleck, who is the weapon master who trains Paul Atreides. And we then actually have Thufir Haywat, who is the spy master. He's the Mentat who end up betraying House Atreides by being brainwashed by House Harkonnen, essentially. So that's sort of how that one sort of does work. So these characters in here are very much story characters. Right, that's House Atreides out of the way. We've got one more to do, which is the new one, which we will be playing. So House Atreides is in very, very close relationship with House Ecaz. Now, House Ecaz, the way it sort of works as well, it's pretty cool the way it does actually happen. House Atreides originally came from a water world and then actually got control of Arrakis. So, and the thought being, well, no one from a water world's going to know how to rule a desert world. House Ecaz comes from a jungle world. Is the lore. Now, this is from the prequel books, not from the Dune or beyond. They don't get a mention, I don't think, in any of the actual Dune books. But these are the young Duke Leto Atreides is essentially I think betrothed to marry Sanya, who is the eldest daughter. I think she gets assassinated, like in the actual prequel. So again, the timing is way out. So she gets assassinated. So then Duke Leto then tries to marry the second daughter, which is Elisa. During the wedding ceremony, the father, in this case, this is another one of these gender swaps that we've got. So we've got the father here is should be Archduke Armand is the book character, but this character in the actual one has come through as Archduchess Amanda. Not that it matters whichever way. Again, I mean, it's one of these things. I'm not familiar with this at all because I haven't read the prequel books. But anyway, Archduchess Amanda is essentially the matriarch of House Ecaz. And during the wedding ceremony between Duke Leto and what's this? I don't know what you'd call her actually, but anyway, what she is. So with Elisa, she's not a princess, but she's not even a duchess. She's whatever they are. Maybe they are princesses. I'm not sure how they sort of are referred to. Anyway, during that ceremony, there's another house which is not in the game, and I'm assuming it will have to come in at some point, who is the arch nemesis of House Ecaz. Like House Harkonnen becomes the arch nemesis of House Atreides, House Ecaz has their own arch nemesis of very, very high subterfuge, sort of always like ninja type sort of characters, and they've been fighting each other for millennia. This is my understanding, and during the actual the wedding of Leto and Elisa, an assassination attempt is made on all of House Ecaz. The Duke, or in this case the Archduchess, loses her left arm in that particular attack. That's why we see her only one-armed. And this actual princess then is actually killed in that particular one. But in this case, both these princesses which were killed historically are still in here just for gameplay and for whatever other sort of reasons, just to sort of have a book character essentially come into the actual book itself. As I say, think more of it sort of like you're playing with the characters from Civilization than from Europa Universalis, if that sort of helps. And so in this case, so this one here, it does actually come through. You can see there it says, having barely survived an assassination attempt at the onset of adulthood, losing an arm and an eye in the process. Well, in the actual book, apparently that's the wedding to Duke Leto, and she does actually get her throat slit and does die, whereas her father/mother loses an arm in the same fight. So that's sort of what does go on there. Anyway, that's House Ecaz. These are also quite honourable, and so it's sort of in the prequels, House Atreides and House Ecaz work together very, very much to try to then eradicate this other clan, and so they actually end up sort of like, I think the prequels are mainly about the alliance between House Ecaz and House Atreides, and so you can see there, and so these are also very honourable. And so the surrounded neutral villages become sanctuaries that cannot be attacked by other factions, and so gain 1 authority production per sanctuary. So this is actually by establishing these sanctuaries where nobody actually controls them, they can actually then end up protecting themselves through independence. They do get extra authority as well by doing that one. Villages adjacent to a sanctuary gain +1 instance of the village's traits. So getting these sanctuaries is going to be quite important. Cannot betray a faction in a truce. So this is actually something, again, where they're honourable. They're an honourable faction to play. At 5,000 hegemony, a single Ekazi village can be turned into a garden resort, which does give it extra bonuses. And a single Ekazi non-mechanical unit can be named the champion, who raises hegemony by killing other factions' units. So becomes sort of like a special fighting unit. And I guess, again, thinking of the history of what I've read about this particular faction from the prequels, they do become quite an honourable but aggressive fighting sort of type faction to sort of then protect what they do actually have, and that would be what their champion would then become. At 10,000 hegemony, they turn 0.2% of your hegemony into salary production, so they get more gold, and the first 50 votes placed on each resolution are free. So if they're part of the Landstaad, they do actually get like a bit of a bonus with the Landstaad as well, I'm guessing because of their honourability. So that's the different factions. That's sort of how the lore all works. It's very, very convoluted. If we go back and I'll just show you again how these sorts of things do. Let's just start a battle for Arrakis as an example. We'll just go with House Atreides, and we'll just go and click any two old councillors. Now you'll notice that the councillors themselves have different benefits. So again, you can, if you're thinking, okay, I'm going to be playing House Atreides with a special ability. In this case, if we needed to have more agents doing things, and we'd choose Thufet Howat. If we wanted to have if we wanted to sort of get more involved with the Fremen, for example, we'd choose Duncan Idaho to actually be that particular character, to sort of then try to make contact with the Fremen on the planet. These are the sorts of things you can do when you do set the game up. There's a lot of scope just in these initial choices that you do make. It really does change what you can then go and do. So we'll just get started. And this is not the start of the game, by the way. I just want to show you how some of these things we've spoken about are then modelled in the game. God, this is a long episode, guys. I do apologise if you've been Well, if you've been looking for gameplay, I did warn you right at the very, very start that it was not going to be any gameplay whatsoever. Anyway, it does take a bit of time to generate the map. I'll just pause. All right, so we've seen this sort of start before. Zoom back out. There we go. We've got actually a little bit of information back over through here as well. So we're sort of seeing, whoops, wrong areas. Not that we need to worry too much about that one, but there's the spice in through there. If we have a look, we can see we've got Baron Harkonnen. We actually have the Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV. So this is House Corrino, and then we've got House Ecaz in the mix as well. Now, there's no loyalty with House Ecaz, even though historically there is. In this case, there's not. Everyone's just vying for themselves. So if we just go back out across, I'll just let that one sort of go and check that one out. Now, we are aware of this. This is a Seitch. So this is Seitch Sino. Now, not sure why. I think that's Duncan, Idaho. If we just pause that for a second and have a quick look. Produces 2 authority per ally Seitch. Reveals a Seitch with 80 relation at the start of the game. And so this then allows us, I'm glad I did this actually, because this one then I can then show, these are the secret locations of the Fremen. So sort of built into the rocks. This is like a cave network that the Fremen are sort of in through there. Very, very strong with the amount of protection that they actually have inside their particular Seitch and through this other side. And so that's actually how that one then works. To get access to that one, we'd need to take over the village, which would be located in here. As this one comes through, it will then sort of get this. It's got a few different locations to then go and check out. But this is essentially where we'd have to get our spice mine established. So we've got a few things to establish back out through this way if we were playing this particular method. But that then shows you the native Fremen, the spice in through this other side. There'll be a village in through here which we'd need to then go and take. As we come back up, we can then sort of see there's going to be other different aspects. So this is the as we get the spice in through this other side, we need to then sell some of it to CHOAM, and some of it needs to go into our stockpile. If we go and hover over this one, you can sort of see there that we have a contract of 80 that has to be paid. So spice tax due to the Imperium condition of your presence on Arrakis. So to be able to keep on mining the spice, we have to then fulfill a contract of keeping the spice flowing, and that contract is 80. So we have to mine 80 spice within the next 23 days, which means we have to then take control of this, get a spice mine established, and then start to essentially get this going. Now we can dictate how much of this is then put into the stockpile. If I go and raise that one up, in this case we have nothing being sold to the spice market through the CHOAM. It only can then be put into the stockpile, but we have a choice as to how we then play that out with the actual stockpiles. We either go and just put as much as we possibly can into CHOAM or stockpile. It depends on how much we actually have, but in this case we're not mining any yet. But that's the CHOAM aspect. That's the trade aspect, the galactic trade. That's essentially the Imperium. It's not House Corrino, it's the Imperium itself. So the house is very separate to the actual Emperor's role as the Emperor of the Landstaad, if that makes any sort of sense whatsoever. That's the CHOAM market. These are the shares. I don't know if we can actually go and grab that one. There's the Imperial tax again, of what's required from the use of spice. So this sort of thing just shows us what happens with the actual spice itself. Now, where's the councils? I don't think we're going to be able to see much of this one. This is our technology. These are the Landstaad Council, and so the next council will start in 19 days, where there'll be some sort of resolution, again randomly chosen, but we get to vote. So use your votes and influence to pass resolutions in the council with the potential to impact the whole planet. And so these can actually be quite overwhelming, but again, it's very cool the way it does work. So do you save your influence to get a vote that may be important to you, or do you use your influence to work diplomatically? Now, we also then have espionage, and I can't do that yet either. That's actually still unlocked. Sorry, still locked until we can go and do that one. But I'll show you that in the actual game itself. In fact, I may be able to load one in. Yeah, this is a game that's a little way in, but at least I can then sort of start to show things like the Landstaad Council comes in, and the way it sort of works, you've got like these different charters, which are important roles that you can then sort of try to fulfill at different times in the game itself. There's different effects that come from them, different areas that sort of then get impacted by these. These are the resolutions that then sort of get applied as well. And so in this case, I'm playing as House Ecaz, and they do actually have immunities that they can then sort of apply for. In this case, against these different things like tax negotiations, diplomatic congresses, labour rights. These are all just random, and so everyone gets to then vote on them ultimately. It's you can see through here, these are the actual votes that everyone actually has. So in this case, House Ecaz has 100 votes plus 56, and we're getting plus 4 per turn. We don't know what the other factions are getting, but in this case, we've got House Corrino also has 100 votes with 36 extra influence. House Harkonnen in this case has got plus 100 with plus 26. Now we can see that the Fremen don't have any votes at all in the Landstaad, but they do actually have influence. So they can apply that influence still with the votes. And then we also then just have down the bottom here, the minor houses have got 300 votes in total. These are the other houses that aren't part of the actual game, but still have an impact on what actually does go on in the actual voting itself. And then we've got like what actually happened in the last area where who voted on what, so we can sort of see where the different votes went in, because you vote on all three things essentially to sort of see whether things were supported or declined, who actually voted how much, so on and so forth. So it's pretty cool the way it does actually work. So that's the Landstaad. So that's the Galactic the Imperial Galactic Council, essentially. The next one we have over through here is the espionage. And so the espionage, what you have is you've got various agents, and the agents can then be moved around into either spying on other factions, counterintelligence to try to then capture or to stop other spy operations against you. These are just where the new agents appear. Then you've got different sorts of areas where you can put your agents to sort of do more high-level things. For example, like actually looking at Arrakis, which will give you more authority and intelligence. The Spacing Guild, again, so this one actually increases your manpower and intelligence as well. And so the Spacing Guild is what we spoke about earlier on, about being the people or the entities that use the spice to then warp space. CHOAM, which is the trading network, which gives them, if you've got agents in here, you get more salari, which is your money, and also intelligence. And then finally the Landstaad itself, which will give you influence and intelligence. So these are different areas we can go and place them. Again, you've got your choice as to how you want to play these out. It's entirely up to you. You then actually have special missions that you can then go and do as well. So you've actually got reveals all information and units in the region. So this one actually does sort of allow advances detection of any siege in the region as well. So if you're thinking that there may be a Fremen siege, you can then sort of start to search with this particular one, which will then cost you intelligence points, defense, sabotage, all sorts of different things, then sort of can be done through this as well. So these are all the intel missions for your spies, which is really quite cool. Again, it's simple, but it sort of models the impact that the subterfuge has in the books and in the movie. Or the movies, I should say now. But it is really quite cool the way it does actually then go and work. And so as you sort of start to play out, you'll then get sort of like a list of your resources, etc., etc., etc. So this just sort of slowly increases as you get more and more agents to then apply to the actual game itself. But again, there's so many different mechanics in the game that then fold in a fairly simplistic way, but still give you a lot of complexity in the overall sort of symphony of how they all come together. I hope that all makes sense. But anyway, that's it's a big game with a lot that can go on, but you don't have to play it intricately. You can sort of play it fairly superficially if you're wanting to. Anyway, guys, I'm going to leave this episode here. So thanks for watching. Again, there is that link down in the description if you are wanting to grab the game. You can see it's got a lot of intricacy. We haven't even gone through the various resources. We'll do that when we start playing. So we'll sort of go through how they sort of all then work. And you can see this is Landstaad standing, for example. There's all sorts of different things in the game itself. This is over here is your hegemony. It gives you a full listing of how everyone else is doing in the game as well. So it's just extremely well done. Different sorts of truces that you've got. This is a diplomatic status that you have. Actually, I didn't show that. I might just quickly show that as well. So if we were going to go and talk with, for example, in this case, we've got a non-aggression pact with the Emperor. But we can go and see, okay, he wants spice, which we don't actually have any. He also wants to have influence. And so we can see what he's actually interested in. We can then just do simple trades, like we sort of can grab these, for example, and get him to pay for different bits and pieces. If we just go and sort of get less, I'll just get rid of that one for a second. If I just get a little bit and just put it in there, we'll see that this trade will then go ahead. It's very simple the way that this one does actually sort of work, this sort of diplomacy. But if we had other sorts of treaties, that if we had them unlocked, we'd be able to then go and trade them as well. But in this case, we could get him, for example, to trade intel. As long as we've got one little slot there, they will accept it. So for 170 intel, which I wouldn't want to do, but if we did do that, he would part with 340 Solari. So if we needed the money desperately, we can sort of do these sort of trades. And currently we have the non-aggression pact with him. If we go to the others, for example, House Harkonnen, we have the same sort of deal in through here as well, where there's different things we can then sort of trade or do different aspects with the Baron himself. Again, you can sort of see through here, non-aggression pact, he would take it, but it's going to cost us pretty much nearly like a lot of our influence to then go and do it, 35, which is a fair bit. So I wouldn't be wanting to do that one. I'd be wanting to, I don't know if he will actually even part with one of these. No, he won't. Not even one, not even 10, sorry. I don't know if we can do that by ones. No, it's got to be by tens. So he won't part with that whatsoever, but he would part with a little bit of this, I would guess. Yeah, so we could actually make him pay a little bit for this. If I just go back this way, he would pay that 90 Solari and we'd then get a non-aggression pact with him if we wanted to, but it would cost us 35 of our influence to be able to then go and do it. So it's very simple to actually then sort of use this. Again, all the mechanics are simple. They just fold in on themselves in a really intricate and beautiful way. And again, if you've read the books, it makes it so much richer to play the game. Not because you're playing historically what happens, but you just get a feel for what CHOAM does, what the Landstaad does. They make sense, whereas I think if you don't actually have the background. So I hope that this episode, even though it's gone for so bloody damn long, I hope it's helpful just to give you that perspective. Anyway, guys, I am going to call this to a close now. There's so much we've covered in this particular episode. I'll be back in the next episode to then start to rattle through the actual gameplay. Thanks for watching.